All right, quick break. Knock, knock. Who's there? Amazon Music. Amazon Music who? Amazon Music, where Prime members can listen to top comedy podcasts ad-free. No awkward interruptions, just nonstop laughs from your favorite shows. It's free, it's funny, and hey, it's better than my knock-knock jokes. Download the Amazon Music app and let the good times roll. Or go to amazon.com/ad-free comedy. That's amazon.com/ad-free comedy to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Saying goodbye to the Johnson Amendment and freeing churches' ability to talk about political candidates. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Listen to this moaning headline from the New York Times. You can just see the author and the editors groaning and moaning and wailing and gnashing their teeth, right, as they had to write this headline. How conservative Christians cracked a 70-year-old law. They're talking about the Johnson Amendment, which is that IRS stipulation that churches in America cannot endorse political candidates while keeping their tax-exempt status. And it's something that has really muzzled churches for years. It's an odd stipulation for a nation that was founded in large part on the quest for religious freedom. And so for decades now, we've had this provision in place where the IRS can go after your church if your pastor or somebody speaking on behalf of your church comes out and publicly backs and supports a political candidate by name. Well, what's really happened from that is that churches have gone above and beyond to avoid the appearance of violating the Johnson Amendment. And that's where the real chill in churches to speak from the pulpit as they please has really come from. And before I get into more of that, I want to mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network. That's the faith-based news outreach of Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills Church in California. Go there, RLN, Real Life Network, and Bold and Blunt is among the lineup of all the offerings they have that gives you your news and breaking events from a biblical perspective, from a faith-based perspective. You may also get Bold and Blunt by going to WashingtonTimes.com, and you can click on the link there and catch up on episodes, or you can subscribe to my Bold and Blunt newsletter. Just go to the newsletter section, click on it, find Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley, enter your email address, and you'll get delivered right to your email box my podcasts, my commentaries, and whatever video podcast versions of Bold and Blunt I do. You can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. I want to quickly mention as well, because it applies, it pertains. The topic matter is similar to this podcast. My latest nonfiction book, God-Given or Bust, Defeating Marxism and Saving America with Biblical Truths. It's out there now. You can order it. You can read it. You can share it with your friends. Go to Amazon or go to Post Hill Press and find it there, or go wherever books are and you can find it there. I saw it in the bookstore the other day, took a picture of it, posted it, so all the world can see. But you don't have to go through all that effort. You can just order it and quietly receive it in the mail and then spend your weekend reading it. But back to the topic at hand. The New York Times, obviously, is unhappy with the direction the Johnson Amendment seems to be taking here in America. On July 30th, as I said, this piece was published how conservative Christians cracked a 70-year-old law. It sounds so dastardly, right? It sounds like this nefarious plan, the Christians in America just working busily behind scenes in the dark shadows to crack, to tear down, to just snap into this law that has been in place for 70 years or so to protect Americans, right? Well, just like most things you read in corporate and mainstream and left-leaning media, whatever they say, you can sort of opposite in your mind, right? Because when they talk about cracking this 70-year-old law and they put it in terms that would suggest, that would imply that this is a negative, what Christians are doing, you can actually see it as a positive. The IRS, the New York Times writes, recently said that churches could endorse candidates from the pulpit, a shift from a long-standing interpretation of American nonprofit law. Interpretation, right? Key that word. Because whenever they say interpretation, what that means is how people in the courts have argued it, okay? So it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the Johnson Amendment stipulated. It just means that that's how it's been interpreted and applied through the years until we reach this point in America 70 years later where if pastors dare to suggest this candidate is better in terms of upholding biblical constitutional principles than that candidate, and the names are stated from the pulpit, that all of a sudden that church can become attacked by the IRS and lose their C3 status, right? So interpretation is a funny thing when you talk about legalities, and it just basically is code for how leftists will use that particular provision in law or in policy or in legislation to skew it and spin it toward their advantage. I'm not going to read through the New York Times piece because it's all about them whining and painting the repeal of the Johnson Amendment as if it's a negative thing. But just think of it from a common sense point of view, right? Just think of it this way. If somebody came to you and said, you are not allowed to endorse a candidate openly, wouldn't you see that as a loss of free speech rights, right? Not a protection of the constitutional system in America. Well, that's exactly what the Johnson Amendment did. And the left has successfully spun it to make it seem as if the Johnson Amendment, stripping the rights of pastors to speak as they would like, is actually a benefit for America's constitutional system. And this goes back to my opening remarks. It just seems such an odd application of policy in a nation that was founded on the quest for religious freedom, right? In a 2022 survey, Pew Research wrote in July of this year, most Americans opposed churches endorsing political candidates. And they posted this, they wrote this, because it applies to what the IRS, under this Donald Trump administration, under this pro-religious liberty Donald Trump administration, is now doing with the Johnson Amendment. So in a recent court filing, Pew wrote, the IRS said that houses of worship in the United States should be allowed to make political endorsements without losing their tax-exempt status. When Pew Research Center last asked about this in September of 2022, 77% of U.S. adults said churches and other congregations should not make political endorsements. Far fewer, 20%, said religious organizations should come out in favor of one candidate over another during political campaigns. So I'm not positive by reading this if when Pew Research Center asked that question in 2022. If the 77% of adults who opposed churches making political endorsements did so because they thought, and rightly so, that if churches did make political endorsements, that would threaten their tax-exempt status, or if all 77% of the U.S. adults who opposed churches in 2022 making political endorsements said they opposed because they were opposed in principle to churches wading into politics. It seems to me that there would be a certain percentage of that 77% who opposed churches making political endorsements in this 2022 survey by Pew, that they would do so out of concern for their churches violating the Johnson Amendment, and not out of simple opposition to the idea of their churches wading into politics. Because I think most Americans nowadays, at least most Christian Americans, most evangelicals, most of your active voting Christian base in America don't mind, either don't mind or outright want their pastors to weigh in more on political matters. And when you say politics, right? Politics, as we've heard before, is just people. It's just about people. Well, it's about guiding the behaviors of people, really, if you think about it, right? And the Bible is filled with politics, so I don't see how you can actually be a church that is relevant and that speaks to matters of importance that the congregation needs to make decisions in their own lives in line with biblical truths. I don't see how you can not wade into the political world. And just because you have the right as a pastor to endorse candidates, or the right as a church to endorse political candidates, as this repeal of the Johnson Amendment would allow, it doesn't mean all the churches out there are going to. It just means that the option is there. It just means that they have the free speech right that they should have had anyhow, that the Johnson Amendment stripped from them. It just gives them back their free speech right that they never should have had stolen from them in the first place, and then it allows them a choice, right? Whether they do or whether they don't. And if you don't like that church as an individual, you're free to continue going there or not. Or you're free to completely disregard what your pastor says in terms of politics. Just because your pastor says something doesn't mean you have to do it. You still have free will. Okay, so the Public Religion Research Institute also posted this in July, talking about the IRS formally declared that churches and other houses of worship may endorse political candidates in their congregations without violating the Johnson Amendment. That's reading right from PRRI. When PRRI asked Americans in both 2017 and 2023 whether churches and places of worship should be allowed to endorse political candidates while retaining their tax-exempt status, public opinion remained largely unchanged over that time. In 2023, PRRI writes, 3 in 4 Americans, or 75%, opposed this idea, while only 20% favored it. These views closely mirror those from 2017, when 71% were in opposition and 22% were in favor. Okay, so reading these two polls, the Public Religion Research Institute and Pew Research, both of which published pieces in July, talking about their previous polls, it seems like most Americans oppose the idea of churches being allowed to endorse political candidates while maintaining their tax-exempt status. And make of that what you will. As I said, I've already thrown out there that maybe some of the opposition stems from the fact that those asked about their opinion during these time frames were more concerned about churches endorsing and losing their tax-exempt status than the simple principle or the simple fact of churches endorsing, and they found it inappropriate that churches wade into politics. Regardless, I have with me a guest today who is part and parcel of this whole repeal of Johnson Amendment reversal and removal, and he knows the deep inside story of where the Johnson Amendment came from, where it stands in terms of the lawsuits and the IRS exemption and what the IRS will do or won't do or has done or hasn't done, because much of what's been reported lately in the media about the Johnson Amendment is outright false. And what opening the doors for pastors to openly endorse political candidates will mean for America going forward. Dave Kubal with Intercessors for America. I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is so great to have you here.
Well, Cheryl, I love being on anything with you, especially something called Bold and Blunt.
Yes, because we're like-minded on that, right?
Boy, that's the truth.
You know, before we get into our topic, just talk a little bit about Intercessors for America, because I love this organization that you head up, that you and your wife Chris head up, and it's just such a much-needed service to America. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, this history is clear that men and women have called out to God for the assistance of the divine in personal matters and national matters throughout history. And we believe that God still answers prayers. He still hears us and wants to be involved in charting the course of this nation, has a plan and destiny for this nation. So we interact with over 1 million like-minded folk who love to pray and love to ask God to come and visit our nation and guide it. So that's what we do. We surround our activities around 3 things: news, prayer, and action. So we let people know what's going on and then invite them to pray and then give them ways to act.
Yeah, and you really go deep with it, because you pray for Barack Obama and Joe Biden, you pray for Donald Trump, you pray for Republicans. It's entirely nonpartisan.
Yeah, well, we've been doing this for 50 years. So we've gone through various administrations and scandals and wars. And so we don't claim to be an arm of any party. And we claim to be representatives of God Most High, and we encourage all political parties, all politicians to align their values with heaven's values.
Yeah, and what I like about it, I go to your website, ifapray.org, right? Intercessors for America, IFA. And you see all kinds of things on there about news and politics, but also faith. And it just goes right to the founding of this nation, the intersection of faith and freedom.
Mm-hmm. Well, for sure. I mean, our founding fathers, they put in place a framework based on the scriptures for this nation: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The meaning of the framers, the writers of the Declaration of Independence, when they use that phrase, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the common understanding of that day, that pursuit of happiness was understood to be the pursuit of a biblical lifestyle. The biblical lifestyle, having a person's life aligned with the scriptures, brings people the most happiness. And so when you dig into the depths of those that helped form this nation, and obviously thousands and thousands of leaders since, there is great alignment with the God of the Bible.
Which makes it so odd how we got from a country of the Black Robe Regiment, right, to churches having to walk on pins and needles when it comes time to talking about politics. And there's been one issue in particular that President Donald Trump has been speaking out about for a very long time. And I know your organization is very hot on this issue as well, the Johnson Amendment. Talk a little bit about, please, Dave, what is this? What do people need to know about it, and what's happening with it?
Well, sure, Cheryl. Growing up in the church, being involved in ministry for well over 3 decades now, I've seen the impact. We have seen the impact of the Johnson Amendment. I won't get into the legalese because the legalese doesn't really matter. The impact of the Johnson Amendment is that people believed since 1952 since 1954, that we couldn't talk about politics in the church because we're going to lose our C3. First of all, my reaction always is I don't allow the government to tell me what I'm going to say. I listen to the God Most High. But the fact of the matter is the Johnson Amendment has done damage to our culture in muzzling the church. It's really government-sponsored persecution of the church, and I have been praying for the opportunity to be a part of reversing that forever, for over 20 years. And little did I know that over a year ago, I was invited to be a part of a lawsuit of 3 others who are like-minded. And so we sued the IRS saying that the Johnson Amendment is unconstitutional. It removes rights that we've enjoyed for hundreds of years before the Johnson Amendment was put in place, and that it was inconsistently applied. Cheryl, think back to last November, right? Vice President Harris showed up in many churches on Sunday morning there towards the end of the election cycle, and nobody raised an eyebrow at that. So it was inconsistently applied. So anyways, long story short, here we are a year later. This case is still working its way through the court system. It is yet to be decided. It has hit the press, and the press has said that the IRS now allows pastors to endorse candidates, and that is our case. That is still being decided. So that is kind of true, but I can't get into all the legalese, but we're very confident that the Johnson Amendment, this government-sponsored persecution of the church, will be removed for churches here within a matter of time.
So the basic layman's understanding of the application of the Johnson Amendment is that churches may speak about political issues, but they cannot outright name and endorse or encourage their congregations to vote for certain candidates. So in churches, they would talk about politics and policies, but never want to bring up people's names. Is that sort of how it's played out?
That is what was the application, is currently the application of the Johnson Amendment. You got it right on the money there. And there's been very few suits that the government has actually sued a nonprofit organization for their endorsing of candidates, and I'm only aware of one in the 40 years that the Johnson Amendment has been in effect. But yeah, you're exactly right that the Johnson Amendment limited churches and nonprofits the ability to endorse candidates, to fund the campaigns, and to attempt to influence elections. But those limitations, the 2 of those limitations, will be removed when our suit is successfully declared.
So, if you don't know the answer to this question, that's fine, because I haven't fully looked it up myself. But I understand the genesis of the Johnson Amendment was in 1954 when Lyndon B. Johnson was a senator. He introduced this as an amendment, thus his last name, Johnson Amendment. But was he a persecutor of the churches? Did he lose votes because of church church involvement? I mean, why would he bring that up? Do you know the history of that?
Yeah, I sure do.
Oh, good.
He was running for re-election as senator, and there was a candidate who was potentially going to be receiving money into a nonprofit, and his attempt to pass this amendment, its genesis was that he was trying to shut down a personal political candidate.
Of course.
And as this process occurred in the Senate, he ended up adding churches. And churches were kind of a secondary consideration in this, but he just wanted to lock down all the potential nonprofits that could be opponents of his. And of course, then, the impact has become obvious.
Isn't it funny how our losses of rights, right? Because this is a free speech right, for crying out loud, and it's so foundational. America was founded in large part on a quest for religious freedom. But isn't it funny how losses of God-given rights sort of seep into our culture and our political worlds, and then they become the norm? I mean, everybody just expects now that churches won't talk politics. And it's sort of been a chill over churches for so many decades, hasn't it?
It absolutely has. And you're exactly right that the Johnson Amendment removed rights. It was a limitation of rights that were enjoyed before then. And so the reversal of the Johnson Amendment is the restoration of freedoms that we enjoyed beforehand. So, don't listen to the press that they're saying that these are new rights or whatever. But it's really the restoration of rights that we've had.
Yeah, a much needed course correction. And, congratulations to you with some other Christian groups out there. And as I understand it, there are a couple plaintiffs in Texas, right? For taking the courageous step to take on this big monster and sue the IRS.
Yeah. Well, the case officially, the four plaintiffs are the national religious broadcasters, two pastors in Texas, and then Intercessors for America. And Cheryl, I want to make this point clear also that the press has been reporting on public recordings that have been entered into the court, and what the press has been saying is that the IRS now allows pastors to endorse candidates, and that's what they're leading with. And I want to caution those of us who understand these issues, those of us who are conservatives, to understand what the IRS did is they settled a lawsuit. What could be said in the months to come is that our current president, President Trump's IRS was the impact of the change came from this administration. And that can really play into the left's hands. But the facts of the matter are that a year ago, 4 individuals and organizations, the 4 of us, we sued the IRS, and the IRS settled. So yes, President Trump has campaigned on this, and yes, President Trump has sought to see the Johnson Amendment reversed. But this was done by 2 organizations and 2 private individuals. It's the result of a lawsuit, and it's not a part of a political effort in order to mobilize a political party's base.
Thank you for that. That's very important to frame that properly because, as you said, it's not President Trump who is riding in on the white horse here. This has been a fight for 20 plus years among Christian communities. So very important to make that note. I know we only have a couple minutes left, but let's just do a quick rundown of your book that's, I believe it's coming out or just came out. Can you talk about it at all? Yeah.
Yeah, impacting generations, how ordinary people affect the future of nations. And it's all about the biblical concept that it comes out very early in the biblical narrative through the story of Abraham that talks about the descendants of Abraham will influence places of authority. And that is our calling. And it really builds on the reversal of the Johnson Amendment, Cheryl, in that we're called to influence seats of authority. And this has been around since 3000 BC. It was true then, and it's true today. So it's the biblical theological framework for why it's important for the Johnson Amendment to be reversed.
Is it out now or a pre-order?
Yeah.
It's out now.
Yeah, it was just released a month or so ago. So hot off the presses, Cheryl, just for you.
Very good. And one more time with the title, Dave.
Impacting Generations. You can get it at all major book outlets, Christian book outlets.
Impacting Generations. I love that title. That's great. Dave Kubal, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt and putting in layman's term what this Johnson Amendment is all about. Very interesting case, and thank you for your fight.
Oh, thank you for all you do, Cheryl. Bless you.
Bless you. And that's another Bold and Blunt. Remember, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, where don't forget, subscribe to my newsletter there so you'll get my commentaries and won't miss an episode of Bold and Blunt. But you can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.